Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Here on this channel we love introducing new lore and concepts within the Star Wars universe. But every now and then we also like to introduce to our fans, especially those who live in universe, insight on the economic infrastructure that keeps the Star Wars galaxy running smoothly. For instance, you might be curious about how that Ewok jerky in your corner grocery store in Coruscant got there. Is it actually organic and killed without pesticides? Are Ewoks sentient beings, and is it ethical to eat sentient things? Yeah. There's actually quite a lot of steps and players involved in the Ewok jerky supply chain, and it's just one small delicious part of the larger galactic economy. A hectic, sprawling mess that spans most of the known galaxy. But Steve, if you were to come up to me and ask me, hey, what should I do with my hard-earned galactic credits that you pillaged from some poor alien homesteader in the Outer Rim, I would steer you away from commodities like Ewok jerky. I mean, the Ewok price boom after the Battle of Endor is not something you or I can predict. And speculation leads to the dark side, so instead I would suggest a company that is so intertwined with the runnings of the galaxy that it could never fail. A company like Kuat. While alien meat prices will rise and fall with galactic events and tastes, there'll always be a huge need for starships in the galaxy, and no one is better suited for that task than Kuat Drive Yards. This is a company and a planet that is too large to fail. And while speculation, regime change, and federal policies will alter the day-to-day share prices of KDY, ultimately the assets that this planetary shipyard holds will probably never change. The only threat against such a company is perhaps the Death Star, but not even Wilhelm Tarkin is ballsy enough to mess with the Kuwati. And so today we're going to be taking a look at why Kuat Drive Yards is a really solid choice for a lot of you value investors out there looking to get a sustainable and continuous growth on your portfolios. Also guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our investment advice. Did you guys know that Samsung is responsible for almost 15% of Korea's total GDP? Did you know that Amazon controls about 50% of America's e-commerce retail market? When you have a monopoly over a certain industry in a country, when you provide billions of dollars of tax revenue and hundreds of thousands of jobs, the government of those countries will undoubtedly be inclined to assist and give you special treatment. While some measures, like protectionism, which is what the United States gave to Harley-Davidson for decades, will ultimately harm companies, it does give investors some peace of mind that the federal government is going to bat for your company. Kuat Drive Yards is not only the largest company on the planet of Kuat, it essentially is Kuat. One does not exist without the other. You see, in the early days of the Galactic Republic, tens of thousands of years before the Galactic Civil War, a group of merchants, most likely from Coruscant, wanted to build the best and largest and most efficient shipyard in the core. These individuals, known as the 10, would hire terraformers to change the planet of Kuat into a luxurious paradise world. And a perfectly balanced ecosystem full of tropical islands, lush forests, and a balanced weather system with cool, wet winters and warm, dry summers. On top of that, no hostile life form were stocked onto the planet, which means that Kuat definitely would not harbor any dolphins. At the same time, over the planet, a massive orbital ring was being built in zero gravity. This would significantly reduce the cost of building and launching ships into space. This was all a part of the appeal of Kuat Drive Yards. Other worlds like Ringo Vinda would attempt to copy such a design, but Kuat Drive Yards pioneered the orbital shipyard concept, and theirs would be the largest and most efficient for the rest of galactic history. Now, while KDY was under construction, all of the other competitors in the industry would try to sabotage the company's dealings, either through legal measures or very illicit, hostile kind of actions. But their attempts only united the Kuat 10 more in pursuing their dream of dominating the shipbuilding industry. And so the 10 families would eventually sign the inheritance exemption. This was a document that would give the 10 families of Kuat permanent control over KDY and its manufacturing facilities. It would also create bylaws which would settle any interpersonal disputes between the families and allow for stability to rule over Kuat for the rest of galactic history. At first, KDY was not a major player in the galaxy. At the time, there were 3 large shipbuilding companies. You had Core Galaxy Systems, Corellia Star Drive, and Horsch & Kessel Drive Inc. KDY would target Core Galaxy Systems first because it held on to a very lucrative contract to provide capital ships to the Republic. Using pricing wars, industrial espionage, and other less than legal methods, KDY would eventually destroy Core Galaxy Systems' ability to compete and would eventually buy them out. At the same time, Corellia Star Drive's entire senior design team was killed in a shuttle accident, and so the top three shipbuilding manufacturers in the galaxy would be KDY, Corellian Engineering Corporation, and Horsch and Kessel Drive Inc. When the Rusan Reformation occurred, not only did it disband the federal military, it also put severe limitations on what type of capital ships and military ships could be built in the galaxy. And so if your company mainly relies on military contracts, you're going to have some issues when the political climate changes like this. Luckily, Kuat Drive Yards leaders were always looking to diversify their holdings. Kuat Drive Yards would eventually purchase many smaller specialized shipyards and also expand their facilities off-world to new planets. KDY would eventually start launching subsidiary companies to meet specific needs and demands. For instance, Rothana Heavy Engineering was where KDY would keep some of their more secretive product lines. When the Clone Army was being covertly created, KDY would use Rothana Heavy Engineering to produce vehicles for the GAR away from the prying eyes of Republic officials. KDY would also create Ubrikian Industries, which specifically built transport vessels for both the civilian and military market. Kuat Leisure focused on civilian vessels, and Kuat Vehicles focused on in-atmosphere repulsor lift-driven vehicles, and Kuat Systems Engineering focused on starfighter design. KDY used its massive influence and capital also gained control and board positions in important companies like the Trade Federation, Techno Union, and Corporate Sector Authority. This actually gave the company an unprecedented amount of control over the starship manufacturing industry, and that was because they also had control over a lot of the clients at this point, and of course, KDY would select their own products here. When the second Boeing 737 MAX crashed, killing everyone on board, investigators revealed a company that was hyper-focused on profit and cost-cutting. Boeing, instead of redesigning what essentially was a half-century-old 737 design, continued to push for cheaper incremental changes, which is where all the problems with the 737 MAX started. Further investigations into Boeing revealed that the FAA basically lacked the resources to regulate Boeing's designs, and so they allowed Boeing's engineers to self-regulate, which is really terrifying. Since the 737 MAX accident, Boeing is still going strong and slowly regaining its stock prices, and that's because it's so intertwined with the US government and national security that our federal government would never allow it to fail. Because then the Europeans and their socialist Airbuses would take over, or something like that. For better or worse, situations like Boeing give investors peace of mind that their hard-earned money won't disappear if they invest in a company like this. And while Kuat Drive Yards dominated the planet that they existed on, what they really needed was a lucrative contract with the Republic. But it wasn't really until the Clone Wars when KDY started gaining significant lead over their shipbuilding competitors. This is mainly thanks to Kuat Drive Yards' massive orbital shipyards. While most Star Wars ships under a kilometer long had in-atmosphere capabilities and could be built within a planet's gravity well and then fly out, superclass dreadnoughts and destroyers that could range from 3 kilometers to 20 kilometers could only really be built in an orbital shipyard. And Kuat Drive Yards, as we mentioned before, had the biggest and best facilities in the galaxy. And so they began creating massive ships for their own defense fleet, like the Manticore-class Star Dreadnought. KDY's main competitor at this point, Rendeli Star Drive, was only capable of creating much smaller ships like the Dreadnought-class cruiser. And so with the outbreak of the Clone Wars, KDY essentially took over all of the Clone Army's contracts. They would be responsible for the Venator-class Star Destroyer, Archidans-class light cruiser, and the Pelta-class frigate. Their subsidiary company, Rothana Heavy Engineering, would produce the Acclimator-class assault ship, along with the LAAT gunship. And that was only the starships that KDY and their subsidiaries would contribute to the war effort. They would also help construct the Republic's walkers, like the ATTE and ATRT. KDY would also be responsible for the HAVW-A6 Juggernaut turbo tank. Throughout the war, KDY would also start buying out smaller vendors in their own supply chain. You see, what they really wanted was complete vertical integration so that they can control everything when it came to manufacturing a vehicle or a ship. And that is exactly what Emperor Palpatine wanted as well. His military-first political philosophy depended on the destruction of the free market and also the civilian job market. In its place would be the imperial military recruitment system and the military-industrial complex. He wanted everyone in the galaxy working towards the stability of the Empire through military means. And so massive companies like KDY, with all of their holdings, were essential for creating a massive military that was also affordable. The story of KDY is the story of a corporation that is so massive that it will most likely become a permanent part of the economic landscape. And while that might be enticing to some investors out there like you, Steve, keep in mind that such monopolies destroy competition, and the long-term impact of this type of company is unknown. Anyway, guys, oceans will rise, empires will fall, but KDY will most likely outlast them all. If you guys want to see more investment advice about Star Wars, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below. Also, guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.